Hey everyone, welcome back to the Becoming podcast. This is episode 9, I believe, and we're here with Pastor Cindi, who's joining us for the first time on the podcast, and Melissa is joining us back again, and we are kind of in a transitional week where we just finished up our Revelation series 2 weeks ago. And this last weekend, we had kind of a transitional sermon that Pastor Chris presented us. He's not with us here, so we can kind of help the audience out a bit and have a conversation around it. Even though he's not here, we can
talk about him.
We can talk about him. That's right. So and fill in some blanks. And so we're excited about that. We're going to talk a little bit about Matthew 13 and these parables that we dived into this weekend during our services. Before we do, as always, thanks for connecting with us here through the podcast. There's a couple ways that you can stay connected. There's via YouTube, so you can watch what we're doing here in the podcast. And you can also listen in via Apple Podcast or Google or Spotify. Wherever you watch or listen, be sure to like and subscribe and share. We want to continue to spread the word about the podcast as we continue to have conversations that lead towards becoming mature, interdependent disciples who make disciples. Mm-hmm. And so we invite you to just listen in to our conversation, and we hope that it spurs some deeper interest and growth in our relationship with God and with others. And so we're going to jump right in here. And Pastor Chris talked about Matthew chapter 13 and these two parables that have, one is sort of an agricultural metaphor, the other a fishing metaphor. We live in a community where these metaphors seem somewhat relevant to us especially as we live next to the ocean. We live in a fishing community. But both of these parables emphasized our role as kingdom people to recognize, so first with the parable of the weeds, that the weeds and the wheat are going to grow together. Our job is not to sort them out. Same with the fishing metaphor. As the net is being dragged through the ocean, our job is not to sort out the fish. It's to catch fish. And so we're being challenged to think about this in terms of the kingdom of God. And towards the end of the sermon, Chris gave us a couple of things to think about when it came to, so as kingdom people, what are we to do? How do we become people that reflect this kind of activity in the kingdom of God? Whatever we're doing, because we, as people who are part of the kingdom, we're all called to be a part of what's going on in that. And so the first thing was, Chris noted that we are to be inclusive people, not exclusive. And so when we think about that, we could frame it within terms of our kind of vision and mission at Brookings NAS, is that first we want to be a kind of people that help people belong to this one family. So belonging and inclusivity kind of go hand in hand. So I want to hear from you guys, maybe some reflections, maybe from the sermon. What does it mean for you to be, for us to be an inclusive kind of people? So Melissa, I'll start with you. What does that mean for you?
Yeah. Well, I want to first start, like, one of the things that stuck out to me the most in this series, or not series, but this sermon, was just the pressure that gets kind of pulled off of us of when we read this passage and we recognize that, like, it is not our job to say who's in and who's out. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like this immense amount of peace when I am reminded of that, of, like, it is not my job to say, like to even say, like, you're you can't be here because of this. Like, and also just kind of how selfish that is, because really when we're not inclusive, it's really for our own selfish reasons, because it makes us uncomfortable. You get maybe the tightness in your chest when somebody challenges what you believe, or you may not get along with somebody in the congregation or outside of the church, and so if they were to show up, it's incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. But in this passage, it challenges us to say, no, like, we all are meant to grow together, and that the kingdom of God, as Chris said, you can't tell who's a kingdom person and who's not all the time. You can't just go out in the community and say, yep, that person is a follower of Jesus and that person's not a follower of Jesus. Well, like, who am I to judge? Mm-hmm. And who am I to say, well, because of this, then we can't do fellowship together? And I think that's something that we talk about a lot in our youth ministry. And especially because, like, for teenagers, a sense of belonging is so important. And I see this happen all the time as teens get in a fight with one another, and, whether it's they like the same boy or girl, or some drama goes down, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I can't go to that youth group anymore because so-and-so is there. Mm-hmm. And it breaks my heart when I see that, and we have to work through those things and talk about, well, hey, like, everybody's welcome here, even if you don't get along. And it's no different. Like, I use my youth ministry as an example because that's my context of who I work with and who I hang out with the most. But as adults, we are no different. Mm-hmm. We do the exact same thing. And so it's learning how to say, can I set aside my own selfish ambitions, and humble myself enough to say, no, like, you are welcome, and I want to do life with you, and I want to set aside the need to tell you that you are right or wrong, and simply just show you the love of Jesus. That's my only calling. That's my only job. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, sorry. That was like I got real into it.
It does. It relieves a sense of pressure and allows us just to walk with people and to do life with them. And so that simplifies a lot of things between having to feel like we have to sort things out. So, Cindi, what about you when you think about that word inclusive and what that means?
For me, we're all coming into the service. We all want to receive from the Lord, mm-hmm. whether you come every week or it's your first time coming into the church doors. And the ones who come here on a regular basis, I think being inclusive to me is being mindful of other people around you. Yeah. And if someone's sitting by themselves, maybe go sit with them or invite them to sit with you and your family. One thing that really touched my heart is when one of our boys went away to boot camp he went to boot camp, then he got stationed in San Diego, and he was really lonely, and he went to a church down there, and a mom who her kids were gone, but she noticed that he was sitting by himself, and she went over and sat with him, and then she took him to lunch with her and her husband that day. And I was far away, but it made me feel so good that she included him and made him feel welcome. And I think that's what God wants us to do, is to look out and see who was bold enough to come to church by themselves. I mean, that takes a lot. It's one thing to come with your family, but if you're taking that effort to come because you're hungry to be spiritually fed, let's just see and challenge ourselves. How many people can I greet today? And coming from coming out of dental and stuff, my job as working with the patients was to make that patient feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. How are you today? How are your kids? Do you have any pets? Yeah. What's your pet's name? Try to remember something about that person. Oh, that person likes to fish. That person's a painter. that person loves the beach. And then, you might remember that more than you remember their name. But people appreciate that you've acknowledged them and what they like.
Yeah, that's so good and so powerful, because it's basically a very, whether asking those kind of questions or just saying, hi, how are you? It says, I see you. It says, I see you and I know you and you're here and I'm glad you're here. And we've all experienced that ourselves too, when we've walked into spaces where someone essentially does that and says, I see you. We've also been in spaces where that's not the case. And we know how detrimental that is to our sense of feeling of belonging when we walk into a room and we aren't seen and heard and known. And so that becomes something really powerful when we think of inclusivity.
Yeah. And it reminds us that everybody has a story. And if we take enough time to say, I want to learn about your story.
Yeah.
And it becomes so much more easy to build a relationship with that person, and just remind us that there's a person, there's a life behind the things that we put up to prevent ourselves from being vulnerable sometimes with other people. So I love that.
One of the ways working with the children in the children's ministry is you bring the kids into the room first and you start out with activities and you get them, they may be a little nervous with one another. And so then they begin to, we made this ooey gooey mess on Sunday. Oh my goodness, I was so grateful for my team leader. Clean that up. But it got the kids who came in, we had a first timer and she was really shy. And then as they began making this mess, she began talking to them and she had made it before. And it just kind of gets them, they relax a little bit. And then we come in to our story time and then they're ready, they're listening. And then after the story, they have that response time to the Lord. And then we end it usually with some more activities. And they feel like that's a way that they feel a part of the group.
Yeah, these little things, hearing people's stories, engaging in an activity together that maybe brings out a laugh or two, and or especially for children, raises their level of curiosity. Those are all really tangible means in which inclusivity can be engaged. And so as we think about this, I wonder for you guys that are listening, what are some ways that we kind of, Melissa and I like to talk about making 1-degree shifts in our life rather than thinking of like, I need to make a big change in my life. What are some 1-degree shifts that I can make to be more inclusive? So as we think about here in our church and our congregation, what would it look like for me on Sunday morning or Saturday evening to be someone who is inclusive to those who might be new to our space, who are maybe walking into a church for the first time? Like, how foreign that must be for someone, and how can we come alongside them and say, hey, let me help you along. I want to help you feel like you belong here. So be thinking about those things as we look ahead. And with that, there's another element of that that goes hand in hand, and that is being able to say, I want to find common ground with a person. So we talked about this passage in 1 Corinthians 9 where Paul basically says, I'm going to become whatever I need to be so that the gospel can be known and heard by people. And I heard a story recently from one of our leaders on the district, and she talked about her being invited to go down to the racetrack for a weekend race, right? You guys remember this story?
That was great.
And of course, she's someone that's never been to the racetrack before. I remember going as a kid, and when you go there, there is a distinct culture that might be very different from something that we know and are part of. And there's a certain kind of language and lingo that needs to be heard and known. And to have the willingness and the flexibility to step into those spaces where we are totally unfamiliar with, so that person we might begin to develop a relationship with that person and begin to engage with them. So thinking about common ground, Cindi, what comes to mind for you when it comes to finding those places of similarities when it comes to building relationships?
For me, I've had a lot of opportunity with this, and we all eat. So usually sharing
Yes.
a meal together.
What a great example.
Coffee, people who like coffee, going for a walk, activities that you can do together that are not, you may have totally different interest. I have a lot of friends who my best friend is totally into horses. And my parents are, and I am not. I don't want to be on a horse. But, I still could go talk with her as she, took care of her horse. Or, I have other friends that, they love the beach. I like the beach on a nice day with no wind. But you can still, especially, find time to listen to somebody. Yeah. And genuinely care about what they're going through. If there's a need in their family, just for me, where I came out from working, people knew that I genuinely cared and that I was there to pray for their needs. And so that was a common bond I had with all of them. I was never really preachy to them, but they knew I was genuine and that I loved them. Yeah. And so they were all various backgrounds, and we probably wouldn't, obviously I'm not a bar person, so that wasn't somewhere I would go hang out with them. But there's other things that we did like to do together. And one of my friends loved to hike. I'm not an avid hiker, but, we made plans to go hiking together. And she's still going to meet me up here. We're going to go do some beach trails and stuff. So you can find things that are, we, even as a church body, people have various backgrounds and like different things, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you, Melissa?
Well, so I was thinking about yesterday. I was reading in Matthew chapter 11, and Jesus is talking about John the Baptist and how John the Baptist was, he considered him the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, but then says, but I tell you that even the least of these in the kingdom of heaven will not be greater than John the Baptist. And it's this total shift in mentality that, John the Baptist was the one who paved the way for Jesus, and he preached the good news, but was called demonic and a crazy wacko guy in the wilderness. And then Jesus, who, ate and drank with tax collectors and prostitutes, and then he's called a drunkard and all these things. And Jesus just basically, in that statement of, even the least of these in the kingdom of heaven, not the least of these here on earth, the least of these in the kingdom of heaven. Who are the least of these in the kingdom of heaven? Well, no one. There's no one that's the least of these in the kingdom of heaven. And so, Chris really talked about kind of this concept of when we try to allow our self-righteousness to get in the way of finding common ground, we miss the opportunity to truly just love people where they're at. And I think even going as far to say that if we always come into a situation with the agenda to make a convert, then we're missing the point. We're not genuinely seeing people where they are, and just letting that be enough, letting their humanity be enough, letting just whatever they're dealing with be enough, because to Jesus, they're enough. And if we allow that to permeate the conversation, then we're going to see God do some incredible things through us. And I loved what you said of just taking that approach of listening. And that's, and something that we've been talking about over the last couple weeks is calling it the bent knee approach of I am just submitting myself to you by offering a listening ear. And I think when we truly stop to listen, we put aside our need to have a say in the conversation, to make our point. I think, when we truly set all that aside, I think we will start to see people in a whole new way. As someone, and I loved what you brought up too, as somebody who just desires to be seen, who wants to be known, because we all want to be known, and that's the whole part of belonging. And so, I have one more story. Can I share?
Sure.
I had a pastor friend who, one day him and another friend were out in a city and they were walking, and there was a homeless person that was sitting on the sidewalk, and so they stopped and talked to him and asked him, what is it that you need? What can we help you with? And his answer was, I just want to be seen. And I just remember this pastor saying, like, I wept, like, because this person, all they wanted was just to be seen as a human being. And, why don't we just start there of just saying, let's just see people. And I think we'll see some common ground. And I love Paul's advice of just, I'm going to adapt myself in whatever situation I'm in, but not throw away, the laws of Christ, not throw away, my values and my beliefs, but be open to maybe a deeper conversation in that.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's where some people might get confused on it, thinking, well, be all things with all people, does that mean I have to compromise my Christian values to go down the road they're on? No.
Yeah.
No. But just not to be judgmental, just to love people. And people know if you're genuine. People know when you ask, how are you, and you mean it. And you can still be a friend without compromising your Christian values.
Yeah, that's so important, and making that distinction, because I was like, okay, in order to meet and be where these people are, I don't have to compromise what I believe, and in fact, we're actually going to talk about this in our next series coming up on foundations, the foundational beliefs of our faith, to recognize that our foundational beliefs actually shape the kind of action that is presented to others, and in the form of, most importantly, that of love towards others. That those core beliefs actually shape our love for others as it does for God. And so that's going to be something we're talking about soon. But yeah, this is so good. And one thing is really what I hear from you guys is that it really begins with us. Is oftentimes, I think maybe in the church we have this mindset, and for maybe a few decades ago this worked, where when the church was in the center of the culture, people came to us and they sort of initiated this relationship because they were coming to our church and our building. And we see a shift now in our culture where there's this invitation to go out and to say, I no longer can necessarily wait for people to come to me, but I have people in my life who I can extend love and grace towards, and to listen to them, and so that they're seen and known. And so it challenges us to step maybe out of our comfort zones a bit, for sure, and to remember, of course, as Chris closed this weekend, to remember to pray first.
Yes.
To whatever next move we make, whether it is a word from our mouth or stepping into a particular situation or conversation, that we are in constant prayer of making sure, like, God, please help me reflect the very best of you in this interaction, that they would be seen and heard, but most of all that they would feel loved. And
wherever they're at, whatever they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And not to try to fix them or to whatever. We're invited to just simply be with them and allow that posture of prayer to shape us, to give us patience and wisdom when we need it, and to really lean into those places that offer an invitation for us to expand God's kingdom to those who need to hear it and want to be a part of it and are invited to be a part of it every day. So this has been a helpful conversation. As we're just kind of hashing this out ourselves, we hope that you take some things from this and are able to think about some of the ways in which we can continue to be a kingdom people shaped by this invitation to be the kind of person that is not interested in sorting things out, but simply being with and for those around us, that they might know Jesus. And so we are looking ahead to, as I mentioned earlier, our foundation series. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be getting back to the basics of our faith. And we're going to have some conversations around that in the coming weeks. And we're looking forward to that time. So thank you, Cindi and Melissa, for joining me and just having this conversation together. So, and again, thank you for joining us. And we will see you soon this weekend. And so we hope you have a great week. And we'll talk to you soon.